Hello and welcome. In this lecture, I'd like to provide a demonstration of how you can read and write to internal and external storage. This is going to be a simple application that just contains some buttons and some edit text where we can take the edit text and, depending on what we choose, either write it to internal or external storage and then also read it back. So let's start by creating a new Android Studio project. We're going to name this just file input output example. We're going to keep all the defaults here. We're going to put it in the right subfolder. Minimum SDK API 15. We're going to start it with an empty activity. And we're going to have a default layout and backwards compatibility. For the interest of time, I'm going to copy and paste the graphical user interface in here. We already know how to create graphical user interfaces, and this graphical user interface is pretty simple. It's just 2 edit text and 6 buttons. All right, so let me show you what this looks like in the design view. And if we bring up Pixel, let's see, and clean, whenever we have XML problems, we want to clean. The other thing here is I'm going to bring up my new string resources as well so that we have all our resources. So I'm going to add the following string resources here so that our layout is able to come up. Now let's try cleaning it again. Go back to the activity layout. And so this is what it's going to look like. Simple app that has a edit text field at the top and then buttons for writing into internal or writing to external memory, reading to internal or reading from external, and then deleting internal and deleting external. So we're going to enter data at the top, and if we say write to internal, that will write the data in the text field to internal storage. If we say write external, it'll write the data in the top text field to external storage. If we say read internal, it's going to try to read whatever's in internal storage and display it down there. Same with external. So a very simple graphical interface with some buttons that initiate reading or writing to external or internal memory, and also, or storage I should say, and then delete internal or external. So this is our entire graphical user interface. I didn't want to go through the whole process of creating this because it creates a constraint layout. We use the constraint layout. It's 2 edit text and 6 buttons. There wouldn't be a lot of learning value in me spending 25 minutes going through the creation of this. This lecture is geared towards understanding how to read and write to internal and external storage. So the first thing we need to do if we want to write to external storage is we have to set up the right permission in the Android manifest file, which is really easy to do. In my Android manifest file, I'm just going to add a permission so that we can write to external storage right there. And remember, if we add the right external storage, that automatically means we can read from external storage. So we have to do this if we want to write to external storage. We don't have to add any permissions if we want to read or write to internal storage. So now that we have that set up, and now that we have our graphical user interface set up, we can start implementing the handling of the buttons in our graphical user interface, which will read and write to external and internal memory or storage. So in our main activity, I want to create some member variables that are going to be used in many of the methods. And opposed to having a lot of duplicate code, I'm just going to add these member variables. So the member variables that I want to add are the following. I want to be able to get my read view and write view for my edit text in multiple event handlers. So that's going to be a member variable. I also don't want to have duplicate code for my writing my data to my external and internal files. So I'm going to create one file output stream and one file input stream member variable that can be used all over the place. For both internal and external storage, I'm going to write to a file named temp.txt. And this file, my external storage, is going to be used in both the external read and write external button event handlers because we have to get the directory to external storage. So I'm going to make that a member variable as well. So what we're trying to do here, remember, if you remember from the lecture, is the main thing that you have to learn in how to read and write to internal or external storage is you have to get the directory. That's really the most special things, is getting the file and getting the directory we have to write to. The reading and the writing is just using Java, the java.io package. Basic reading and writing of any file like you would for any other file. Nothing special for external or internal storage. So I'm going to set up some of these member variables in my onCreate function. I'm going to initialize onCreate. You usually initialize member variables. So inside onCreate, after I load my layout, I'm going to do the following. I'm going to set my read and write views for my edit text by just looking for the IDs. And then I'm going to look for the 3 resources of each button. External, read, write, and delete. The reason I need to do this is because I shouldn't allow the user to write or read to external memory, or delete for that matter, if there is no external memory. Remember, external storage, not every device on Android has external storage. If you don't have an SD card, you don't have external storage. Now, you still have the external storage partition, so the APIs will still work, but I really shouldn't allow them to write to external storage if it doesn't exist. So I want to create those buttons, and then what I want to do is I want to write a couple helper methods that will tell me if external storage exists. And this was from the lecture as well. So we can check if external storage is writable by doing the following. I want to write a helper method that says, is external storage writable? And I can use the environment instance, or in this case a static class, to call getExternalStorageState. And if it returns media mounted, that means that I have writable storage. I also want to check if the external storage is readable. So I can create another helper method that just checks a different state coming back from the environment class, which is, we're still calling getExternalStorageState here on line 50, except now if the media mounted equals the state and it's read only, then I return true. So now that I'm checking whether external storage is readable or writable, I can disable or enable the buttons based on what those methods return. And that's what I want to do in the onCreate. So in onCreate, I want to check if the external storage is writable or if it's readable. If it's not writable or it is readable, I want to set it to false. So what this is saying is, if you cannot write to external storage or if you only have read access, then set the buttons to not be enabled. They'll be grayed out. So I shouldn't be able to write or read. I shouldn't be able to have the user have that option. The other thing I want to do is I want to initialize my other member variable, which is my external file. I want to get the document dir for my external file. And get document dir is a helper method that will return the external file that I need. So get document dir is going to create a new file by calling get external storage public directory. So what we're creating and writing and reading to for external storage is public. So it can be shared amongst many apps. I could use the other method, get external storage directory, I think it's called, or get external directory, and that would create a private external storage directory for just this application. But I'm not worried about it, so I'm just going to have it shared amongst all applications. And I want to put the external storage file in the directory documents. So these are 2 important things. Remember from the lectures that we use get external storage public directory if we have public data on our SD card, shared amongst many applications. We want to use the constants from the environment class for all of our directories where we want to read or write to. In this case, directory documents, since I'm just creating a file that's in the documents directory. So the rest of the code is now implementing the buttons so that I can read and write. So I want to implement my writing of internal storage first. So here's my event handler for when the user clicks the write internal in the graphical user interface. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to get all the text from the edit text view. I first need to get the data in order to write it. Then in line 63, I'm going to call open file output. This is the method that you can call when you need to get the directory for internal storage. You pass in the file name and then you pass in mode private. It always has to be mode private, or else there's loopholes where other applications can access it if they know the app name and so forth. After I've gotten the right directory and file name, then I just use the Java.io file methods. I just call write, and I write the bytes from the data in the edit text view, and I call close. And that's it. So now if we were to build and compile this, when we click that button, we should see something in internal storage, a file that's created. So in order to see if something's in internal storage, we have to bring up DDMS, and we have to use the File Explorer. We can't access the directories on the emulator unless we start ADB in root mode. So I just wanted to show something else that's important before we test this. So we know how to get to ADB in Windows. We can just bring up a command prompt, and we can navigate to our platform tools directory. So mine is in users, JFedin, app data, and it's in local, Android, SDK, and then platform tools. So here, if we start adb.exe, if we say kill server, and then we start the server, but we don't start it in root mode, this is what you're going to see. So we start the ADB server. Now we can bring up DDMS to look at the File Explorer. So if we go to Android, we go to Android Device Monitor. I already have it up. So if I hit data, I can't access anything. And the reason for that is it's because the Android Debug Bridge executable is started as your local user. You must have Android Debug Bridge started up as the root user, or you can't view any of the files. So if I go back to my DOS command prompt and I try to look at adb.exe by going to the shell, I do an ls, you'll see a lot of permission denieds. That's because ADB wasn't started up as root. So what we need to do is we need to start ADB up as root. We're first going to kill the adb-server, and then we're going to start it up as root. We can just say adb.exe and we can say root. This will start it up as root, and now when we go to the shell, once it's started, we should be able to see everything. So now when we do an ls, we don't have any permission prompts. And also when we go to Android Device Monitor, DDMS, we'll be able to see the files directory, which is where internal storage is located. So now if we select data, we can see the stuff in the data. And we know that all of our internal storage is in data, and then the name of the package. So this is just something you need to do if you want to access internal storage on the device. You have to make sure that ADB is started up as root. So now that we have DDMS up, we can test our application that we wrote. And right now, the only implementation we have in our application is that it's going to write to internal storage. So we've implemented the write internal storage button. Anything in the edit text field should write to a file. So if I type some stuff in here, Jason is a great teacher, and then I say write internal storage, it should have written something in internal storage. And the way that we can verify that is we can go back to the file manager, or go back, I'm sorry, to the file manager in DDMS. So now when we go to data, com.example JFedin, file input output example, we go to files, we go to temp, we're going to pull this, we're going to save it in a downloads directory. And if we bring this up, we should see the data from the edit text inside there. So now when I bring up that file, I see that everything was written correctly. So the writing is working. So now let's implement the read. So the read is going to be pretty easy as well, except we are going to be doing some duplicate code because we'll be reading. The reading is going to be the same for external or internal storage. It's just going to pass a different file into it. So we're going to create a helper function for this to reduce duplicate code. So here is our event handler for read internal on click. This gets called when the user selects read internal. I'm going to create a read data helper method because I can then reuse it in my reading external data. So let's put that down there. And we're going to go through this code. So read internal click is going to create an input stream, and it's going to call open file input. You'll notice open file input is different than open file output. These are the two methods you use when you want to read and write to internal storage. And then we pass in a file name, which is our temp.txt. We're then going to call our helper read data, which takes an input stream. Now read data, we'll be able to reuse this for our external. That's why I wrote it. All it does is it does Java file I/O stuff. This can be used for any file. Nothing related to internal storage. I create an input reader, a buffered reader. I create a couple lines and I read each line. And then all I do is I set the edit text for review. I set it to whatever I read in. So now let's test this again. I'm going to build this and I'm going to run it. And when I run this, I should be able to read without writing anything because the file already exists still. The file doesn't get deleted until the application gets uninstalled. So if I say read internal, you're going to see Jason is a great teacher. Now if I try to write something new, Jason is a bad teacher, and I say write internal. Now when I say read internal, I see Jason is a bad teacher. My writing is not appending. It's rewriting everything from scratch. We could append it if we wanted to, but you'll see that the reading and writing is the same. And again, just to verify this, if I bring up DDMS and I look at that file, I should see Jason is a bad teacher. So I go to data, and I go to com.example, jfedin, and I have to go to my application, file input output. I go to files, I go to temp.txt, I pull it from the device, I save it in the same spot I did before, which is downloads, and then I look at it in WordPad. You'll see that it says Jason is a bad teacher. So this is how you can read and write your internal storage, just using those two methods that are important. Right. The really important things you need to learn about writing to internal storage is reading data. This method really, it just does Java stuff. Nothing new for Android. The new stuff for Android is this open file output and open file input. This will get you to the data package name files directory. And then from there you can write or read however you want. The last thing we wanted to do was check the delete method. How do you delete a file from internal storage? To delete, I have to implement the event handler for the delete button, which is delete internal on click. All I have to call is delete file and pass in the name of the file. So here I'm going to save it, build it. I'm going to run it again, and when I select this button, I can check the File Explorer to see if the file no longer exists. And every time I go to DDMS, it turns off Enable ADB integration. So I can't do the instant run. So now I'm going to just say delete internal. I'm then going to use the File Explorer to see if it worked. And it's already launched. So now I'm going to go to data, my package name, which is com.example jfedin, file input output, go to files, and nothing's in files. So it was deleted successfully. So since the lecture is running a bit long, I think we're going to divide this lecture into two. In the next lecture, we'll talk about how we can read, write, and delete files from external storage. We'll pick up basically right where we left off here. Thank you.